We're hearing slogans such as Build Back Better and the Global Reset from national leaders who posture on the world stage and concern themselves with ever greater means of control under the guise of false emergencies and scare campaigns. Vaccine passports are the next great thing. It's all for our benefit. With the US national debt reaching $28 trillion, that's $4 trillion more than a year ago, and real domestic emergencies, exploding crime and violence and other social crises, and a loss of control on their southern border, you would think the leader of the free world would look at getting his house in order first. However, the corporate tax rate is soon to rise, and the new administration is looking to coordinate with other countries in a scheme for a global minimum tax rate. In Australia, the focus is not on economic reform, though we have, for now, insulated ourselves from the worst effects of COVID-19 with very strict draconian border controls. There will be a reckoning, though, when our borders open, and that could be next year, the year after, or 2024. Australian national debt is over $700 billion and is expected to reach $1 trillion in a few short years. Government really should be fixing things in their own backyards, such as supporting the environment for business and employment growth, and removing costly regulation and infrastructure constraints from important sectors of the economy, such as agriculture, mining and manufacturing. This is not happening quickly enough. A prosperous agricultural sector is critical to supplying not only Australia's own food needs, but those of the rest of the world. In 2020-2021, the gross value of agricultural production is estimated at $66 billion. In spite of this staggering figure, most of us appreciate that our farmers have been doing it tough in recent years. Senator Malcolm Roberts from One Nation is on a mission to remove the impediments to growth of this critical sector of the economy. Senator Malcolm Roberts, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Mike. Good to be with you again.
The gross value of Australian agricultural production is expected to come in at a staggering $66 billion in 2021. However, farmers face many problems. What's the greatest of these?
Well, water is number one, because water is a huge multiplier. You get good soil like at Colston Lakes, just inland from Bundy and Maryborough, and it just magnifies the productivity enormously, like 4 or 5, sometimes 10 times as much, Mike. So that's pure profit just by providing water. The second one is property rights and making sure that farmers are free of regulation so they can actually do their job. And the third one is access to labour, because if you've got crops planted, grown, and you can't harvest them, well, you're not going to make any money. And if you can't sow them in the first place, you can't make any money. And the fourth one is energy. We've discussed that many times. Energy is the multiplier. It's the key. But at the moment, water regulations, over-regulations, and lack of workers. And so what it means is that farmers are at the mercy of fire, flood, drought, and they need to be agile and getting their resources together in the right environment, a productive environment, so that farmers can actually make some money and give us food and fibre.
What are the costs and worst examples of regulations faced by farmers in Queensland, for example?
Well, we've discussed the stealing of farmers' property rights as a result of the compliance with the UN's Kyoto Protocol, but that's the biggest overall, and that goes beyond Queensland. But in Queensland, the biggest cost is regulations, and right now they're being savaged by this state Labor government, Mike, and over reef regulations. Now, these are supposedly based upon science, but they're not. We've exposed that in Senate inquiry of the so-called academics who are pushing this nonsense. They claim that the pesticides and also excess fertilizers are going out into the ocean and polluting the Barrier Reef. It's absolute rubbish. For a start, we under my questioning and along with Senator Jared Rennick, we got the first time ever, we've got the figure out. It's only 1.5% of the Barrier Reef that's supposedly affected, because that's the only amount of reef that is affected by, that is in a reef. There have been measurements on the outer reef and middle reef, no pesticides, no trace, not even in the 1 in a billion parts, no excess nitrogen at all, nothing at all. So it's just the 1.5% of the inner reef, and that is shown no change. So the targets for pesticides are not being exceeded. The middle and outer reefs are pristine, as I said. There have been no coral growth rates since 2005, which is 15 years of no data. So I don't know what they're basing these claims on. And so there's no need for regulations whatsoever. The other thing, Mike, is that farmers have made huge changes over the last couple of decades, but there's no sign of changes in the reef. So they've had huge impact on their farming practices, huge cost impost, but no difference on that inner reef, and certainly no touching of the outer reef. So what we've got is costs in the millions, hundreds of millions to the Queensland agricultural sector, and costs to the tens of thousands of individual family farms for no benefit. So this is what's really hurting the farmers.
Tell us about water security and what parts of the country are still struggling with insufficient water supplies, which is quite ridiculous if you think about it. We've had so much rain, and yet there's just still not enough water around in parts of the country, in particular Queensland.
Yes, I will. Perhaps if I could just add a bit more to what the farmers are facing in regulations, because, Mike, I don't know of a single farmer that puts on excess pesticides, excess nitrogen fertilizers, because they just get flushed out to sea. They don't want that. They make sure that they look after the environment, because the environment is going to determine this resale price they get for their property when they sell and retire. So they like the environment, they want to take care of the environment, and they don't want to flush excess money down the rivers and onto the reef. So it's complete nonsense. It's against the farmers that they would waste it in the first place, and there's no evidence of it. But when it comes to water, we've seen Guyra and Tamworth in northern New South Wales facing severe shortages of water. We know that Stanthorpe in southern Queensland, near the New South Wales border, ran out of water and have been carting water now by trucks for 15 months, and it's cost the Queensland government about $10 million. Fortunately, the dam, Storm King Dam, is now full again after the recent rains. But you know, that $10 million, Mike, could have been used to build 3 or 4 town weirs to hold the water that's needed to get them through the next drought. And our One Nation policy, which we'll be releasing soon for water, has a Weirs for Life, I think we called it, Weirs for Life policy, which will make sure that the height of the weirs is raised to capture 5 years worth of water supply for critical towns right throughout the bush.
What about the impact of costs to farmers? What is it?
Yeah, well, it's not just farmers, Mike. In 2000, I've got some figures here. We had in storage and dams, we had 2.78, say 2.8 megalitres per head of population. By 2030, they're expecting that to be down to 1.75, a 30% cut. So it's affecting the whole country. But what it means for farmers is that they can't plant the crops that they're wanting to plant. Some of them, for example, around Bundaberg have changed their cropping to get more high-valued crops. And now all of a sudden Paradise Dam, which was built by the Beattie government, I think, in 2005, is showing signs of potential failure. And so they've reduced the dam wall height, and therefore the capacity of the dam. So these are the challenges, because what happens is if you have water unavailable, it means you don't plant much crop. Or if you have this lower quantity of water, you change the crop. So that means you have reduced incomes the following year, and you also have a loss of confidence, psychological impact, not just on the farmers, but on the whole communities. And the Queensland government has got itself into this mess because they've driven this state broke. We have a debt now of about $130 billion, and $10 billion was due to COVID last year, but the rest was due to negligence and stupidity from the Beattie government, the Bligh government, and now the Palaszczuk government. And farmers are paying the price for that.
What can be done? I mean, we hear a lot now about the problems with Bundaberg and the citrus growers, cotton growers, because there just won't be enough water. How do we fix this? I know we've got to build bigger and better dams, but short-term wise, what's the answer?
Well, we do need to build dams, but what we need to do is look at a whole productive capacity of our country, Mike. That means taxation, energy prices. These have all been artificially wrecked by federal and state governments. I mean, we can't get workers into the bush to plant crops, to harvest crops, and process crops, and so we're wanting to import people, but we can't do the backpackers at the moment because of the coronavirus. And so basically there's a lack of courage in our leadership in state and federal level. They're woke, they're afraid to build dams. We see Warragamba Dam in New South Wales, for goodness sake. It's just spilled over after Flannery and the others who said that it would never flow over again. We can't increase the size of the height of that dam wall to capture more water because we've got UN restrictions on us from the World Heritage. And so this is absolute nonsense. There's a lack of vision, a lack of cooperation between state and federal governments, a lack of governance, and frankly, the Queensland government is broke. As I said, $130 billion in debt. We can't keep going like this. And so we've got to look at the basic things that create a productive environment, our productive capacity: tax, energy, water, investment in dams.
What's the latest on the supply of workers to pick crops? It's okay, one thing to grow them, and I'm from the land myself, so I know what it's like to have an orchard full of wonderful citrus, but if not, or having grapes or cotton or whatever the crop is, but if there's no one to pick it, you're in deep doo-doos, aren't you?
Yes, and I've got some figures here in my office prepared. In February, the National Lost Crop Register, which started in December 2020, surpasses $45 million in losses at the farm gate. Queensland, it's $33 million in losses. It's affected 85,000 agricultural businesses, and it goes right across the country. There's an example from Western Australia of a watermelon farmer who lost 40% of his crop went to waste because they didn't have workers to pick. In Victoria, celery crops, $50,000 worth, were dumped because no pickers. In Queensland, we've had many vegetable crops ploughed in. A strawberry farmer in Wamuran, in our state, just north of Brisbane here, is planting only one-third of the usual workforce. And regional towns will be affected because incomes come from next season will be reduced because of low harvest. And so what we've got is a lack of cooperation and poor governance in both state and federal. And we need solutions to bring overseas workers. The shortfall that's being faced at the moment looks like about 26,000 workers. And, the government is giving money or offering money for people to relocate, $1,500 to assist in relocation to rural locations for Queensland residents. We've got federal government offering $3,000 for relocating to a capital city, $6,000 if you relocate to a regional area, if you're an Australian worker, $2,000 if you're a visa holder. And Mike, all we've got in the way of take-up is 500 people. We need to urgently fix the structure of our society in this country, because we need to, first of all, fix the tax system for making it easier, making it more incentive to work, making it easier to employ people. I mean, why the hell do we have payroll tax? We know that whatever you tax decreases. So why are we taxing payroll? Because that's just decreasing jobs. We also need to make sure we have a taxation system that gets foreign multinationals to pay their fair share of tax, because Australian companies can't compete against these foreigners who don't pay company tax. The whole structure of our society needs to be reconsidered and thought about from the basics upward to create a productive environment, because we've also got a welfare system that destroys the desire to actually work.
Can you paint a picture of Australian agriculture at the moment? I mean, I read somewhere the other day, someone said the Australian consumer needs to be educated in the fact that the produce that they're getting from the supermarket is not manufactured in the supermarket. There is another world out there. So there's this great divide, it's almost like the COVID thing. We're all in this together. We're not in this great divide between the metropolitan areas or even the larger towns compared to smaller towns and the rural areas. This divide and this appreciation from the major metropolitan areas to what Australian agriculture really means to their economy and to their well-being it sort of diminishes as time goes on, doesn't it?
Yes, and are you telling me that milk doesn't come from cans in the supermarket, it comes from cows?
No, it comes from cans.
Oh, does it? Oh, right.
There's a farm around Cairns, I should say that, sorry.
Right. You know, the ability to feed ourselves and clothe ourselves is fundamental. Without food, we die. So oxygen is the highest necessity. They're even trying to tax that, trying to tax the air we live in. They're trying to tax the food. They're trying to tax everything. But just the food itself is starting. We're starting to import food from overseas. We're importing food from China. We're importing food. We would be able to import rice from Vietnam, except that they're keeping it for themselves now. We used to grow so much rice in the Murray-Darling Basin, but now we import rice, and Vietnam has shut down the export to us because of the coronavirus. We import 3/4 of the seafood we eat, and yet we're in the largest continental shelf fishing zone in the world. And we have 33% of the world's, 36% of the world's marine parks here. And so we're shutting down our fishing, we're shutting down our farming, we're shutting down our rural areas, but we've got wonderful farmers. And the problem we have is that the wombats who govern us in Brisbane, in the state Labor government, and the Liberals and Nationals and the Labor Party have destroyed federal governance. We have now got people working for the government instead of the government working for people. We've now got a virus that is managing us. Somebody gets out of the health system in this state and they lock down the city of Greater Brisbane. The government is not managing the virus is managing us. We've got small farms going broke because of Murray-Darling Basin, for example, a lack of water, over-regulation, and right throughout the whole country. And so we've got wonderful farmers who take care of the environment because they know the environment increases their productivity, taking care of the environment. They know that the environment maintains the value of their farm. And so we've got farmers who look after the community, but we've got corporates coming in due to the policies of the federal government in particular, but also state government, and destroying family farms, destroying the environment, stealing the water. We've had governments that have John Howard's government separated it with Malcolm Turnbull as water minister and environment minister, separated the access of water allocations from from the ownership of land. So we've had this complete mismatch. But you know what? Farmers in Australia are the best farmers in the world, and we can return to being farmers in this country, exporting more by adding water, enabling workers to work, and giving farmers the freedom from regulations so that they can get on with the job. You know, all it needs, Mike, is government with a vision, government that will take responsibility for providing a business environment that encourages investment and hard work, and and restoring our productive capacity, and then getting the hell out of the way and letting farmers get on with it. That's what we need, because we've got world-class farmers who are passionate about growing food and farmer, and they are used to being respected, but at the moment they're being downtrodden. We need to free them up and let them get on with the job.
The farmer, my dad, is now retired. You have friends, a lot of friends who are farmers. They have one thing that we haven't got a whole lot of in Canberra or in major metropolitan areas. It's called common sense, and we need a lot more of that. We need to support our farmers and the industry. Senator Malcolm Roberts, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome, Mike. Thank you for having me.
Joe Biden has called for a global minimum tax of 21% as a way to minimise competition from other countries, such as Ireland, and minimise domestic economic damage from a large increase in US corporate tax. Joe Biden seems to be in overreach mode at the moment, with his insistence that the rest of the world follow in his footsteps, except when he's climbing stairs. Now, it would seem when it comes to these global tax rules, Ireland is certainly number one on the hit list. For the last 20 years, Ireland has had a simple message: invest here and you will pay just 12.5% tax on your Irish profits. Blake Christian is a partner at Holthouse, Carlin and Van Trite. Blake, thanks for joining us once again.
Thank you for having me.
Joe Biden has raised the prospect of their push for a global minimum tax rate. How successful do you think he would be? And I imagine there's going to be strong pushback from countries such as Ireland, where the rate is just 12.5% on their Irish profits.
I think you're absolutely right. We're on, just getting our economies restarted, and tax policy is a big driver in that, in attracting international businesses to your shores. And so I don't think he's going to have quite the reception that he thinks he might. I really think it's going to fall on deaf ears. To me, it's trying to put together, OPEC, when you're, when prices are super low. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
The administration has suggested a figure of around 21% for the global minimum rate. Would major economies find this high or low compared to their prevailing rates? Now, Ireland is 12.5%, and a lot of the major companies such as Google and other companies which have just escaped my mind, but they're all moving to Ireland because of the 12.5%. So it's pretty, there's a great incentive there and pretty appealing, isn't it?
Right. Well, his concept is to put a minimum tax based on book income, and so he's got a huge disconnect between taxable income and book income, and the reason a lot of companies' taxable incomes and tax liabilities are so much lower is because they're taking advantage of incentives. It might be depreciation, it might be capital investments, tax credits for solar and green energy. And just because some companies take advantage of this, they may end up with a very low tax rate, but they've changed that, the actions on the part of that company, which is what tax law is kind of designed to do. And so to answer your question, the blended average tax rate in the EU right now is about 21%. In Asian countries, it is a little bit lower at 20%, and then the Americas, so South America, North America, etc., are running about 27% on average. And so really this 21% is probably somewhat strategic. I've also seen 15% kicked around. So I think he's picked that number because these other countries are already there. What isn't obvious though is the EU, they've got this the whole, and they're in Australia too. They've got the whole value added tax, kind of a national sales tax, and taxing things as they move through production cycles, and so they're collecting on that too. So that 21% is kind of a little bit of a misnomer because it doesn't include the value added tax.
What would the benefits be though to the US?
Well, if we're jacking up our rates and then people start looking over the fence and saying, oh, you know what, I could start my manufacturing plant over there and cut 10% off my tax bill, they're going to do it. It's so, over the last 3 decades, it's, we have truly become, globalized, and it's very easy to start and stop businesses in different locations depending on, regulations and tax rules and things. So that's what he wants to stop, is like, don't look over there because the tax rate's going to be the same. Don't you just love the, all the infrastructure we have over here in the U.S.?
I think Joe Biden probably should take a leaf out of Donald Trump's book, and if he heard that, he'd fall down again, regardless whether there are stairs or not. But Donald Trump was pro-business. He was America's president. You would probably say that Joe Biden is the world's president in his feeble mind. And at the same time, it would also show that he's not that concerned about business, He needs to make money. He needs to raise money from taxes and to finance all these halo-driven initiatives.
Yeah, it's again, I think he's going to run into a little bit of a buzzsaw when he starts meeting with these other international leaders, because to me right now, it's kind of, we're all, international communities working together for, COVID suppression. But, when it comes to the economy, it's every country first. And I don't think they're going to, compromise on their tax policy just to satisfy the U.S. president. I just don't see that environment right now.
Now, how would it affect large entities such as Amazon, Google, who currently pay very little tax?
Yeah, so again, because a lot of them are using, with technology, it's real easy to kind of silo your technology in a low tax country like Ireland, and then they license it all over the world from that low tax jurisdiction. So they've been, I don't want to use the word abuse, because they're just taking advantage of the way the tax law is written. But that's the big reason that they don't pay much income tax, the big data companies. So they would definitely get hurt by this. And they've got, they have been onshoring some of their profits, but I can't remember if it was Amazon or Alphabet had, $90 billion offshore. I think that maybe Apple was way up there too. And, they under the Trump tax bill, they could onshore that at around 10.5%, I think it is. And, that brought a lot of money, into the U.S. system, and also allowed them to expand in the U.S. So, again, the tax policy does change companies' behavior for the better or worse. And, we'll see that. I do want to interject, if I was advising Biden, and he hasn't called me, but if I was, I would tell him, keep the 21% rate where it is for companies making, say, less than $10 million. And, but, companies making more than that, I agree. I think they can pay a slightly higher tax, but I'd rather see it, at 25 or less. But I think I'm disappointed that there's not a discussion that, smaller businesses should get a lower tax rate, and tax the guys that are making 100 million or 10 billion.
What about countries, if they say, for example, a country says, okay, Joe, you're president of the universe, you may not know it, but you are, just watch out for those steps. But if they say, okay, we will agree to do what you want, but then they offer other incentives to make them more competitive to US corporations, that could be a bit of a problem for Joe's plan of this great global reset that he's part of.
Right, and I wouldn't be surprised that that's what his policy advisors will be talking behind the scenes with these guys. Is, hey, look, let's go out with a unified position. We can tell everybody we've got this 21 or maybe it's 15% minimum tax rate. But, you guys can do whatever you want beyond that, and, give them interest-free loans or give them tax credits, for the first 10 years that'll wipe it out. But, I think he's looking for, the headline, but there could be a lot, as you're suggesting, in the details.
Well, I could see Ireland, once they heard about this, they would have almost choked on the Guinness. But then they would have said, in a very kind way, they would have said, oh, you can bugger off. We're not going to do that. Most countries would say, look after your own, first of all, look after your own citizens, and let us worry about our own country. Now, what about business? How have they reacted to Joe's quest to conquer the world?
Well, I mean, I had a few meetings with clients today, and that was their top issue. Is like, what should I do? Should I be selling assets? Should I be reworking my estate plan? Should I change my form of business? And so it's certainly top of mind with all businessmen right now and women, and it's the uncertainty is not a good thing. And it also, it's going to make people do, somewhat irrational things. I'm afraid, until we know all the details. But it's unnerving to most.
Now I can just see over the distance there. There's Joe, Kamala, a few others there with the little green hats on, tights on, leotards, and boots. Let me see this, and they got their bow and they got their arrow ready to shoot, to bring this increase in tax rate. So it's a terrible sight. He can climb trees. When will the higher US tax rate be introduced, though? I mean, he got the arrow ready to hit its mark. When does he let go of the arrow?
Well, I mean, I think that the arrow's flying. It's just a matter of him getting enough congressional support for his infrastructure bill and the taxes that'll go along with that. And there's certainly a lot of criticism on all the pork that's in that bill right now. And a lot of people feel that he's just aimed very high on purpose so that he can negotiate down and get to a smaller spending package, and likewise, the tax rates won't go up quite as high as he's thrown out right now. And then people go, oh, it's not so bad, but it's still a big change.
Well, I see Robin Hood, aka Joe Biden, again in there. He's takes from the rich and gives back to the rich, especially with the climate change programs. Hello to Bill Gates and all those others. So he's not giving to the poor, really. He's just moving it from one area to another area. It's going to be very interesting if Robin Hood, aka Joe Biden, does get through most of his wishes. I would think the US is in a state of flux and change, going from a capitalistic and a lovely economy to more of a socialistic. In fact, I mean, Fidel must be rolling around with the laughter because Joe's doing what they wanted to do in the first place in Cuba.
I would offer some advice to these international leaders when he does go there for this ask about the minimum rate. I think they should say, well, why don't you go back to the U.S. and have uniformity in all your states on their tax policy? And when you're done with that, then come back and talk to us, because that's the great thing about the United States is you can have Nevada with 0 tax, or Wyoming with 0 tax, in California with 13.3, and then people can decide where do they want to do business, where do they want to live, what tax policy do they like, and why shouldn't that be the case internationally? We don't need uniformity on tax policy.
Interesting times, especially if you can visualize Joe Biden and Kamala up in a tree with a bow and arrow. That's when you need some Irish Guinness. Blake Christian from Holt House, Carlin and Ventrite. Before we go, how does someone get hold of you and talk to you about taxing issues?
So our website is hcvt.com, or you can just Google Blake Christian CPA and all my contact information will be there.
Blake Christian, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And that's it for Asia Pacific Today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mike Ryan.